Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's me. So after 6 years of austerity, the government, in the shape of the new Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has decided that more pain isn't necessary after all. Remember, George Osborne's original aim was to aggressively cut public spending so the nation's books were balanced by 2015. He missed that by a mile. Then, when it was obvious that he couldn't hit his original target, he changed it to 2020. And that will be achieved by even more cuts in public expenditure. Again, all the signs were he had no chance of achieving that either. Now the plan to balance the books by a set date has been abandoned altogether. So having decimated local government, hacked the budgets of hundreds of publicly funded organisations, cut benefits to millions and damaged the lives of the poorest in this society, the government has, belatedly, decided it was the wrong policy. Thanks a lot, George.
Are you saying that you think it's wrong for us to have the target of getting to a position where we are not spending much more than we're actually bringing in?
Well, it depends where you are in the cycle, in the economy. But at the stage at which George came in, it was a ridiculous decision to cut as savagely as he cut. There were different ways out 5 years ago. There was an alternative. If you look at the Keynesian economics, basically said at times of recession, you spend public money, you spend it on infrastructure, and you spend it on other things, so that actually that gives you growth in a society. The tax take goes up, and you get out of it. They went exactly the opposite way, which just keep cutting, and the trouble is, it hasn't achieved what they set out to do.
But even Ed Balls, if I remember rightly, they both had the same strategy of trying to get to, cut the deficit, get to a surplus, start cutting the debt. They both parties had that same view. So this isn't just a Tory vision and a Tory dream.
It was a coalition view. But if you listen to what Nick Clegg now says, and I read it to you, he said, welfare for Osborne was just a bottomless pit of savings. And it didn't really matter what the human consequences were, because focus groups had shown that the voters they wanted to appeal to were very anti-welfare. And therefore there was almost no limit to those anti-welfare prejudices. So they chose to do it. They chose to do it by cutting certain things. I mean, local government has been decimated. You talk to anybody in local government who runs local government, they're almost down to where all they can do is spend money on what is required of them by government, and there's almost nothing
Let
left.
me just pick one cut and just ask you if you think it's wrong then. So, for example, if we talk about the welfare caps and bringing that down to, I think it was 26,000, do you think that was wrong?
Per family.
Per family. No, I thought that saved almost nothing. If you actually look at the numbers, that saved
But do you think it was wrong?
That wasn't Michelle's question.
Yeah, but
that wasn't Michelle's
question. Do you think it was wrong?
Well, I think there was some logic to it. I understand the
so
logic.
You think it was right?
But that didn't save much money. So
do you
actually,
think it was right or wrong?
No, I said to you, I think there's a logic to it. Personally, I'm not sure I'd have done it, but it's up to them.
This is why the IFS says that the way there comes a point at which you cut so much that it actually costs you more in the long run. And if you pick some of those benefits cuts, I'll give you two examples from stories that I worked on. One, we've cut legal aid in a huge range of cases like homelessness, right? The cost of making someone homeless is about between £30,000 and £60,000 a year. The cost of free legal advice to prevent the eviction and help them deal with their arrears, about £1,000. So, it's a simple sum that actually costs you more to let people to fall into destitution than to provide quite a cheap public service that would prevent them falling into it. Another one is the housing benefit cap, right? People are being moved out of areas where they can no longer afford to live with housing benefit into cheaper areas. I looked at one example where a family of 5 was moved from a North London borough to a coastal area that was much cheaper. When they got there, no support network, no community. The mother killed herself. All 5 of her children were then taken into care. The cost of taking children into care compared to the cost of housing them in their community is astronomical. And of course, I'm not going to try and quantify the cost of children losing their mother. And these are the kind of things that have really been happening. Austerity is real. It's changed people's lives. And it's cost public money that was never, ever calculated.
It didn't work.
Can I just say...
It didn't achieve what they were trying to achieve.
Can I just say that taking economics classes from Greg Craig Dyke, who of course until recently was the FA, who spent $50 million on a bunch of Herberts to run in the England football team, is like taking dancing lessons from Ed Balls. If you will accept that's one of the reasons why, when the Labour government, last left, the note was there's no money left in the till. Partly global recession, I know, factors beyond their control. Partly because they adopted some of the tactics that you want. They spent money they did not have. You can't run your own life like that. Why do you think you can run a government like that?
But the trouble is it didn't work. You remember they were going to balance the books by 2050. No, but you had to do something. But logically, you would have spent more. I mean, the Keynesian economists would have told you spend more money on which is what this government, which is exactly what this government is now going to do.
That is supposedly what we'll hear in November.
They're
going to borrow cheap money
to invest,
cheap money,
which is what you like, which is Keynesian,
and invest in infrastructure, and that will get more people in work, get them earning more money, paying more tax, and it'll help balance.
But they could have done that in the beginning and saved some of the pain that they've caused.
They're not restoring the welfare.
I think Michelle's point was a really, really good one. That £26,000 cap per family. Important to say that. Yeah. That speaks to a culture that needs to be addressed.
Sure.
Because I think it was George Osborne's words, but there is a culture of living on benefits. But that's second and third generation. That must be addressed.
It must be addressed, but it's not necessarily anything to do with economic policy, right? Because it didn't save a lot of money. The real truth is what they needed to do was to say, how do we get this economy growing again? How do we get it growing faster? How do we get more people in work, and how do we get them earning more money so they're going to pay some tax?
But does the Keynesian model allow for global recession, which is what was also at the same time? So you've got global recession, I don't think it does it?
No, but if you go back to the 30s, where we did adopt the Keynesian model to get out of the recession.
You were just reaching retirement in the 30s.
Yeah, I was in my youth. In the 30s, it worked, and it worked partly because I have to say because of the Second World War. Which was
the boom.
It was an incentive for demand, but somehow. We should be saying, look, this is what you told us. You told us this is what was going to be achieved.
But Greg, is there any point I'm not quite sure where you're coming from on this. Are you crying over all the spilt milk and all the... Wait, sorry. And over the fact that austerity was pointless? Or are you angry about the fact that you think a Tory Chancellor is now abandoning austerity? Because I don't think this Tory Chancellor is remotely abandoning austerity. What he's doing is what he calls it is a fiscal reset. He knows, because the IMF has said, that actually you need to spend for growth, and he is going to invest. But I don't think you're going to see any reversal of the benefit cuts and the paring down of local government or anything like that. But I mean, we're going to see some infrastructure work.
And just yes, but that's what we could have done 5 years ago.
You know, Nick, what you mentioned about this whole idea of the intergenerational dependence on welfare, you know, the figure shows it's actually a tiny number, and the cuts that were made were to working tax credits, remember. That's hitting low-income, working people. It's not people who sit at home living off public money. So the idea that it's this culture of laziness and not working and dependence on benefits, why do working people even need tax credits to be able to make ends meet? The reason is that income is too low. So I think the idea that we should expect low-income workers to pay the price of austerity, and now we've all acknowledged it didn't even work. Nobody is really taking stock of that.
We don't know what state we might have been in.
It has come down to 90 billion from 145 billion over a 4-year period. So that's not bad.
Those figures. Say those figures again.
Well,
from 145 to 90 billion.
154 billion to 90 billion. So George did a bit of good.
Okay. I still think I'm right.